Surrealism, a 20th century avant-garde movement in the art and literature which sought to release the creative potential of the unconscious mind. Or in layman's terms, it's the feeling of something that looks real but really isn't. It can be a great way to give something a disturbing look done perfectly in the first FNAF game, or in our case, it can make a place feel fantastical, but at the same time, like it can still exist in our own world. Sonic the Hedgehog's art style, I think, is best when it's made with surrealism in mind. Of course, games like Colors that take on a more fantasy style still look amazing, but I feel like you get more immersed in a Sonic game when you're running down in a world that can't be real, with looping roads and ramps in the middle of cliff sides, but still feels like somehow it can. Like in Sonic Adventure 2 where you're snowboarding down the streets of San Francisco, or in Sonic Unleashed where you're running through the villas of Greece. But I feel like the game that does it the best is Sonic Adventure, the first mainline 3D Sonic game for the Dreamcast. The game that many believe transitioned Sonic from 2D to 3D the closest, and that just doesn't go for the gameplay, that goes for the surrealist art style as well. And it's my opinion that this game does that art style the best. So, this intro is long enough. Let's find out how Sonic Adventure perfected surrealism. So first off, I want to say that we won't be looking at all the levels, because if we did, we would be here all day. I'll be looking at the levels that do it the best, however. And I think we should start off with the place that you'll probably spend the most time in, the hub worlds. And while they don't have that Sonic staple of loops and ramps, they still bring that feeling of surrealism, especially once you get to Mystic Ruins. And I think a big reason for that is just being on the Dreamcast. I don't know what it is about early 3D video games, but specifically for the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure, for lack of a better term, ironically, it looks like a dream, something ethereal. I don't know if it's the low polygon models, or if it's the low resolution textures, or the saturation of everything. This game has a very distinct, fantastical, but realistic style that I don't think any Sonic game, hell, any Dreamcast game replicates as well, maybe besides Nights into Dreams. Looking at the actual place, compared to everywhere else in the game, this is the most realistic area of the game. It looks like a normal city, station square. There isn't anything that seems out of the ordinary, but that quickly changes once we get to Mystic Ruins. This place already feels like something ancient, and if you destroy this wall, you'll be in this place. Angel Island, this once floating island now on the ground, and we get to see the pedestal of the Master Emerald. And if we go deeper, we get into the jungle, where at the top you get this fantastic view of the entire forest, and we have this Mayan temple peeking through the top of the forest, and depending on your progress, you can even see Eggman's base in the background. While these places are a bit more realistic compared to everything we'll see later in the video, they still give off a more ethereal vibe to it just because of the unique look of Sonic Dreamcast games. Now, we finally get into the first action stage, Emerald Coast, and I have a lot to say about this stage. And when we start off, things feel familiar. It's a beach hotel with a row of chairs and umbrellas. But as we go down the shore, things start to get weird. We come up to this boardwalk and it already breaks off. Sonic has to bounce between springs to get to the other end. And as you walk down the boardwalk, you have the slight glint of the lens flare hitting Sonic, and then you hit this loop that's naturally made that Sonic goes through and launches him into the air. And from this point, you leave the hotel and run along the quays, and once you launch off this ramp, you go into this little cave. And these walls naturally formed into pillars, and you would also see a naturally made ramp on the cliffside, where then you would go down this path that takes you to a naturally formed triple loop. And before you go onto this iconic whale chase, you see a massive arch that goes through this boardwalk, and for some reason, this boardwalk goes right through the middle of the ocean. Once you reach the lighthouse island, you can make your way up the cliffside, and here we start to see the introduction of these small floating landforms. And once you get to the end of the lighthouse, you get to the next section, with this beautiful rock shelter type area where Sonic can just naturally run up the wall due to the natural landscape, and you can see these two waterfalls just coming right down. It's a very, very nice set piece. And once you get to the end, you see a hole. And once you get to the other side, you see this hole where Sonic can go on a loop-de-loop. And once you get to the other key, you go up this path and you can see that there's even some fences here, like the hotel put them here just in case someone decided to wander off. Once we get to the bottom, we see these floating landmasses again with the panels. And then the final bit takes you on a path that takes you through these winding cliff sides with a loop that takes you through a giant rock, and that marks the end of the level. This level shows us a lot of what this game is going to be full of. It's the perfect mix of realistic elements with things that can't exist, like this nice beachside hotel juxtaposed to naturally forming loops and pillars that are naturally forming on the cliffside. This is going to be a pattern we're going to see throughout the whole game. And oh my god, we're already 6 minutes into the video, and that was just the first level. Alright, well, let's keep going, folks. Up next is Windy Valley, and I think this level does the surreal style in such a unique way, which I'll get into later in the section. Starting off, honestly, this feels pretty grounded. You start off high in the Mystic Ruin Valley, and the darker and grittier colors make this whole area feel way more grounded than anywhere else in the game. But what's cool is that all around you can see like these windmills that's like just attached to all the land, and you can see these rocks even being propelled by windmills. Almost like this area produces so much wind that somebody or some company was like, we can make this into like some windmill energy place. And another cool thing adding to this fantastical feeling is the big gimmick of this level, that Sonic can be carried by these airstreams to reach different parts of the valley. So far, while we have these fantastical elements, this section is pretty grounded. Oh. Well, this is different. Yeah, so you get sucked into a tornado, and yeah, I don't think whole land pieces can be carried in a tornado like this. But once we get past that, we are in the surrealism. Boom! You know what I'm saying? That made no fucking sense. Once you're shot out of the tornado, you're just here in these whole floating islands, and you have to travel through different islands by running on these metal paths. And it's that juxtaposition with the floating islands where we have these natural looking land masses with these floating metal paths that aid Sonic. And even some of the islands feel kind of like not man-made, but man-assisted, like windmills carrying whole islands in the sky. And I feel like that makes this level the most surreal. And this vibe kind of reminds me of the Corridor of Time from Chrono Trigger. Up next, we have Casinopolis Zone, which at first glance seems like a normal casino with a giant Sonic statue and an interesting cowgirl sign. But it also has a life-sized, or in this case hedgehog-sized, pinball table with a sewer system that's very conveniently designed like a level. But overall, the surrealism isn't as prominent here. Ice Cap, on the other hand, right off the bat starts you off in this cave with these massive, no, I'm not saying massive anymore, with these large ice crystals. And later on, we'll see that they play more than just a visual role. Most of it is just a snowy mountain, however, but in the center, we have this really icy cavern. The lighting is low, but the reflection of the snow gives off a soft light. The whole section is a climb up to the top of the cliffside, and on your way up, Sonic has to jump from these large icicles, and then he has to run onto the cliffside, and it even seems like there was some life here, since there's like these fences right next to the loop that almost looks carved into the mountain. And for some reason, it feels like the whole time the level is like discouraging you from making it to the peak of the mountain. Especially when you get to the snowboarding section, it's literally boarded off, almost like it's warning you. And then obviously we find out it's an avalanche. Ah! But on that snowboarding section, while it feels like a normal mountain, there are these giant ice crystals that we've seen earlier in the beginning of the level, but this time they're gigantic, and they'll fall over and try to stop Sonic from making it to the end. Overall, this level does a great job at amplifying that surrealism by taking what you think about when you think about snowy mountains, like the cold atmosphere and the ice all around, and amplifying it times 100 to give it that familiar yet fantastical vibe. Now, up next is Twinkle Park. Now this one's very interesting because to most, the whole level seems to be suspended somewhere in space, but we know it's the amusement park. And my theory on this is that the whole park was like inside one of those domes, like the one in Vegas, or like all around there's like these just massive screens that just project like it's looking in space. The park itself seems to be built completely differently than most amusement parks. Instead of you going around from the center to all of the attractions, you start at the entrance and on a linear path. so that you don't miss out on everything. You go from go-karts, then going to the main park through a roller coaster, then as you go along you encounter a bowling alley, a carousel, and eventually you climb up the castle to get to the exit. And what I think is really cool about this level and the way of showing its surreal style is that it's kind of in-universe. The whole point of the park, and it's called Twinkle Park, is to make you feel like you're in this magical place. And I feel like this kind of in-universe way of trying to make it look fantastical kind of adds to that surrealism for me. I don't know what it is. I think that's really smart though. Up next is Red Mountain. So what I really like about Red Mountain is that the whole place feels like a factory of sorts, or at least someone is building something here. You can see all around you pipes, zip lines, and man-made platforms that hint to someone building stuff here. And honestly, this first part ain't super surreal. These mountain ranges look like they could exist in real life. It almost reminds me of those desert areas in Dragon Ball with the big pillars. But where shit gets crazy is when you go underground. The music changes drastically and the vibe shifts with it. The level design here is way more straightforward to allow more of Sonic-esque design, like the path curving on the wall. There are these large spiders and flaming skulls on the wall as you go further, and you see these large machinery and these prison cells with prisoners that don't look human or animal or anything that we've even seen in this game. And then the wheels start turning and you start to think of what if Eggman is keeping these people here as prisoners to work on building this factory to power his machines. And that's what makes this level feel so surreal to me. For the first part, it's pretty grounded in reality for the most part, but once you go inside, the whole level completely recontextualizes, and that surreal look comes back, and it almost feels more effective that way. Finally, I want to talk about what is possibly the most iconic level from this game. Now, what's difficult about city levels is the thought of how do you take a place that is so grounded in reality and make it feel surreal, because most of the time you end up having a futuristic city like Cyberpunk or a more fantasy style like BioShock. But here, I think they did a really good job. And the level wastes no time getting started, taking you down this long road that takes you to a massive loop that then launches you off a ramp, where you then land on top of a skyscraper. And something that I love about this game is how high up the level makes you feel, with these towering skyscrapers that are so high up you can't even see the ground. Then, once you take this elevator, you take this road that turns around to allow Sonic to run on the side of the building that can either take you to the top road, or if you fall, you have to go through this tunnel. And as the level goes on, you keep taking these bends and roads, jumping onto helicopters to travel through different buildings, and we even get this iconic corkscrew road that is synonymous with the level. Then eventually you go inside of a building, and then another iconic scene happens where Sonic has to run down the building to try and avoid hazards in the way. And again, just selling the sheer height of the building, when you get that down pan shot, you don't even get to see Sonic get close to the ground. You get to go inside the building before that ever happens. And when you do reach the ground, you get to the At Dawn section, and it's a complete 180 in aesthetic and level design. It's this bustling, claustrophobic town at sunrise. You have cars going down the street trying to get to work. Everything feels so compact compared to the openness of the city. And right as you enter, you have this sidewalk that goes up the building, giving Sonic a clear way to get to the rooftops. And from that point, you can either traverse the bottom trying to avoid cars and move through traffic, or get to the top path, go on top of the buildings and jump through the different alleys, or take the upper roads that let you wall run. And I think this level worked so well, and the reason it's so iconic is because this is probably surrealism done at its best throughout the whole game. It takes those super grounded ideas of man-made structures and environments and still finds the way to make them feel unreal, while at the same time still making them feel like they could somehow exist. Like, yeah, looping roads would never exist in a real city, but it makes sense that a road might be made into a loop, if you get what I'm trying to say. It's the way that the level is able to still feel like a Sonic level, but also feel like an actual city. But overall, I think the reason why this game does it the best out of any Sonic game is because I feel like it does the best job at making you feel like this world could exist and still have Sonic level elements be all around the game. When you look at games like Sonic Unleashed 06 and especially Frontiers, I feel like those games are way too leaning into the realistic vibe that rather than letting that fantasy feeling breathe. Especially with Frontiers, that's one of its biggest criticisms. It feels like just a generic realistic world and it doesn't really feel like a Sonic game. And then you have games like Heroes, Forces to an extent, Lost World, and the storybook games where they don't let the realism breathe and lean way too much into the fantasy, and they lose that immersive feeling of a world that could exist but is still uniquely Sonic's. Sonic Adventure, I think, nails the perfect balance of combining realistic elements with fantasy styles, with floating islands in the sky, with these naturally forming loops, with a castle that's just suspended in space, but then at the same time, you have a hotel on the side of the beach. You have Rocky Mountains. It all has that perfect blend. And that's why I feel like Sonic Adventure Perfected Surrealism. And that's really all I have to say for today, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment down below. What do you guys think? Do you think this game perfected it? You think another game does it better? Let me know in the comments. I had fun making this video. I think I had a lot of fun, especially like thinking of some cool camera shots to do with the meme maker for the cool. I think y'all gonna like this video when it comes out. I hope so. I had fun writing it. I'm gonna hopefully have fun. I'm recording this. I haven't recorded any footage yet, so I hope I have fun recording the footage for it because it's gonna be fun to do all that. And hopefully I can get it out by Saturday because it's a long video, 20 minutes. But hope y'all enjoy the video. I'll see y'all in the next one.